is the biggest, what we're calling one of the biggest blind spots in driver recruiting. And to go ahead and cut to the chase, the idea is the phone call in general. It's a blind spot for a lot of different reasons, but I'm going to kind of talk about a few of the reasons, and then I'll let Aaron and Kyle kind of riff on what I'm talking about. So one big reason that it's a blind spot is I think people are unaware of how many calls that come into their recruiting team that just are lost to the ether. So it's not just calls that you miss, it's calls that, get lost in the IVR. It's calls that get routed to a recruiter, and then he's at lunch at the time. And so they never leave a voicemail, or maybe even they leave a voicemail, but you never actually get them back on the line. Most drivers, because they're applying to multiple fleets at one time, is kind of a call once and you either get them on the line with a live recruiter or you don't. There not much ever comes of that. So probably 70, what we looked at is the industry average based off of our reporting is about 70% of calls that come in never actually reach a live recruiter. So about 50% of those are missed. Another, some go to voicemail, which will show as an answered call for a lot of systems, but they never leave a voicemail. Some actually leave a voicemail, but about 70% of them never actually talk to a recruiter. So maybe we'll start with Kyle. Kyle, why is that such a huge blind spot or a loss of value for recruiting teams?
Yeah, there's so many reasons why the value is lost. One, if you're paying, vendors like Randall Riley, or you're placing marketing and you've got phone numbers in the market for drivers to call, you're paying for that marketing and media. And if the call doesn't get answered, like it genuinely is wasted. I mean, most drivers are talking to 6 to 8 fleets. Our research has shown that for, a tale as old as time. Drivers are going to talk to 6 to 8 fleets. And if they're not talking to you, they're going to keep talking to somebody. And so the biggest piece is just that wasted advertising. And then the other one is that I think is equally important. It's the calls that you're not paying for. It's the driver who, looked you up with Google or called the number on the back of the trailer that you didn't have, marketing budget behind that call. And if you can't engage with that person, then you can't have a conversation. And if you can't have a conversation, you can't hire them. So that's the leakage, if you will, in the process, in the recruiting process, is those missed calls. They mount up so quickly and they happen day, night, weekend, holidays. And so there's tremendous value if you can just make a little bit of headway with your missed call strategy. And a lot of people haven't thought about it because we're looking at leads to hires and lead types and our recruiters and how they're doing individually. We're trying to coach them. And this big, hairy monster of missed calls, I don't want to say it's out of sight, out of mind, but, kind of digging into that a little bit. We really find that when clients can pay some attention to it, can look at the technology, can look at their IVR, can look at their phone system, what can we do to, our answer rate and connection rate? Those fleets make massive inroads on, increasing hires and decreasing costs as well.
Yeah. Aaron, what would you add to just, why calls in general, and maybe there's some other things in there, just like attribution. I know phone calls don't get counted in a lot of attribution models. What are some other just kind of big blind spots when it comes to the phone in general with recruiting teams?
Well, I think it's a unique industry that we're in. When I say unique is most other industries, not all, but most other industries, if you're trying to hire talent, they're sitting behind a desk or they have their phone available. So whether it's a form, an application, some type of a text, you don't have to talk to them and you can still have pretty good engagement.
Right.
The driver makes things, it's just so different that, for the most part, they're driving all day. So a call is so much more valuable in the driver talent acquisition space. Hopefully that makes sense. And I feel like everybody on this call would say, that's common sense. But when we look at process and we look at follow-up, it doesn't line up with that. That's the big thing for me is you have a much better chance to get them on the phone, and they're willing to talk while they drive, but they can't text, they can't email, they can't fill the app out.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point of just, we've talked a lot of our content, a lot of these things we talk about speed to lead and how necessary it is. You were talking about, the nature of a driver being on the road. I imagine many leads, not just phone calls, but leads are submitted after hours, and your ability to follow up with that in a timely way is paramount to hiring that driver. So what percentage, and I'm going to ask the audience, I'm going to go ahead and poll the audience real quick. What percentage of leads on our end do we think come in after hours? Got any on that, Kyle? Did I spring one on you?
Oh no, I thought you had a poll. Sorry.
No, I was going to ask you guys what you guys think.
All right. Well, for some clients, it's very, very low. They do a very good job of getting, I'll say, sub 10%. I don't want to say near zero leads coming in after hours. Some of the best clients, it's like 10 to 15%. Some of the worst clients, it's 50 and 60%. And that's nobody's fault, because there are scheduling features within a lot of advertising solutions. But if you've got job postings in the market and that driver sees the job posting on their schedule, they're calling on their schedule, not yours. And so that kind of begs the question, okay, what can I do? Because that's a problem that we've got to solve, as an industry. What can I do to help that person get the job and the information that they're looking for? And so, by and large, fleets are seeing anywhere, I would say, from 40 to 15%, somewhere in that range, of their leads are coming in when they don't have the staffing to engage with them.
All right. Well, what's the big, it's just like, I think it's one thing to say leads come in after hours. I think, and as Aaron was saying, it's like, hey, with drivers, with most industries, that's not a big deal if the lead comes in after hours. I want to ask first, why does it matter that leads are coming in after hours as far as trying to hire them? And two, what do most fleets do to combat leads coming in after hours? Why don't you start us, Aaron?
What was one again?
So one is why is that an issue at all that leads come in after hours? Is that an issue at all? Just follow up later, right? Or in two, what do most fleets do to kind of combat leads coming in after hours?
Okay, so the first one, the two things that come to mind, there's many, but two of them that maybe we don't think about enough. And I believe I've mentioned this before, but I don't think a lot of teams, when we get in and kind of look at their process and look at their applicant tracking system, they don't schedule their follow-ups the next morning based off the submission time from the after hours lead, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I do see many, quite a few recruiting teams just work top to bottom or full applications and then short forms, but it doesn't take into effect when the form came in. So if it came in at 3 a.m, there's still a high likelihood that recruiter, just going through their checklist in the morning, is going to attempt to call that person back at 8:30 a.m.,
mm-hmm.
which is not ideal, because if it came in at 3 a.m, you're probably not going to get them at 8 a.m. So I think that's a big one. And then the second piece to that would just be, how often do you follow up?
Right.
Scheduling the time, how often, even asking the question, which I know we've brought this up before. Hey, when's the time to catch you? And then the last thing I would say is a decent amount of fleets are doing night driving, or it's a PM shift or a third shift, or a 10 p.m. start time. So you're hitting someone in the evenings, but they're never available to talk if you're trying to recruit them at 9 or 10 in the morning. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yep.
The recruiting department doesn't align with the actual job you're trying to recruit for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right. So before I want to kind of get into the true value missed of, all these phone calls, but before we jump into that, I do want to kind of, and I have another poll for this. I've heard it a lot of say, like, there's a lot of limitation there's a lot of limitation when it comes to there's a lot of limitation when it comes to attribution in phone calls. I know, like we were talking about lead, like if someone calls after hours, let's say they call, they don't let it go to voicemail, even if they do, how often does that call end up in their applicant tracking system? And then from a broader standpoint, if those missed calls or calls that are even answered, that usually, as I understand it, isn't even factored in to like their marketing attribution from where hires came from. So Kyle, why don't you start us off, give us a real quick on this, because I don't want to spend on attribution too long, but what's kind of a big blind spot when it comes to calls and attribution or calls being tracked inside of a applicant tracking system?
Yeah, the hardest part is you've got different technologies that don't talk. And so, if Aaron calls at 7:00 at night and doesn't leave a voicemail, like he is entirely gone. He is back out into his job search, and there is no record for the recruiting team to call him back tomorrow. Like that just doesn't exist by and large. There are a very small handful of clients who have tried to make their phone system and the alerts and types of calls and results of calls turned into some sort of follow-up activity in their ATS. And that's a pretty big lift. So the biggest piece is just the drivers that call. There's about a 91% chance they don't leave a voicemail, which is the other hard part. Only 9% of drivers who reach a voicemail leave a message. And then our data shows only about half of those actually ever end up in an ATS. So you could kind of summarize it this way. About 5% of drivers who make it to voicemail ever end up in your ATS. And that's really scary to think about.
Yeah, that's a lot of value missed, and a lot of value just in a blind spot, if you will.
Let me add to that.
Aaron, why don't you, before we go, Aaron, before you kind of riff on attribution part, I do have a question that came in. It says drivers who typically blow the phones up are the ones that don't qualify or want what we don't offer. How do you weed those out so they don't waste your time? So how do you kind of pre-qualify drivers that are calling is the question there.
All right. So I got two things. I'll answer that one in just a second.
Yep.
And I just want to piggyback off the voicemail piece, but
yep.
We've identified quite a few clients that voicemails are full. We're trying to do kind of secret shopper or just quality assurance tests, and the voicemail option is full and you can't even leave a message. And quite a few have even said, I don't even know where that voicemail is. I don't even know how to check it. So that may sound silly, but that has been, I don't know, half a dozen, maybe 8 or 10 times that's happened. It's not a one-off. And then the second piece, when Kyle was talking about folks that don't leave a message, there's even a decent percentage that do leave a message, and there's not a great process for that follow-up. Who checks that voicemail? And then to your point, David, are they round robin to the recruiters the next morning? And do those voicemails get entered into the system as a profile? Do you create a profile, or do you only create a profile if you actually get the person back on the phone? Anyway, there's a lot there that doesn't happen in a lot of recruiting teams' process. So there's a gap there. Now, as far as weeding out calls you don't want to talk to, I don't think we have a surefire solution, but I would say that some of the best clients I know, they take profiles for every candidate. And this is a great reason why you should. We'll have some clients that say, if they don't meet our criteria, why would I create a profile for them? That's a waste of my time. Why would I put that in my system? One reason would be, hey, they may not be disqualified or not qualified forever. So, maybe it's a ticket or something that falls off after a certain amount of times. But the other reason, a few carriers that come to mind say, we create a profile for this very reason, that if they do keep calling in, I at least have that profile in there. I identify that number and we won't answer it. So without the profile, you keep answering it and, oh, it's the same guy I talked to 2 weeks ago. So anyway, I think there's value in creating the profile to help you not waste time if those calls do come in.
Okay. So we kind of talked to, go ahead.
One more. You can add exclusion lists too. I'm sorry. Your marketing partnerships. We do have clients that'll give us exclusion lists, people that do not meet their criteria. If you send us their email and phone number, we can upload that into our system and it will exclude them from any marketing collateral. So they can't see the ads, they don't get calls. Now, obviously that's not 100% fail safe, because they can go to your corporate site, but there are ways to not waste money on unqualified candidates if you give an exclusion list.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so we've talked a little bit just about why phone calls can be such a blind spot for people in recruiting. We've talked about kind of, all the leads that come in after hours that make it so difficult. And then we've talked about why it's like, well, not only is there kind of the blind spot of attribution of, they don't end up in your ATS. They're not really attributed in your marketing for a lot of people. But I want to get down to, because of all that, if you say, if that's true, what is the true value lost? What is the true value lost to the fleet because of this, swath of calls that never end up talking to a live recruiter? I'm going to go ahead and add this poll to the stage. It's been live, but it said, do you know what percentage of calls are either missed or go to voicemail? We got 42% have said, yes, we tracked that, and 57% say no idea. So let's start doing some math real quick. That's going to be exciting. Let's start doing some math real quick, Kyle, on what is the true value, and let's make it dollar signs. What is the true value missed for all the calls that never end up talking to a recruiter?
I think you have to think about your lead. Start with your lead to hire ratio.
Okay.
And what is the value of that hire, and then the lifetime value of that driver to your company. So we'll just start with, let's just say it's 40 missed calls and you have a 40-to-1 hire ratio. That's a hire that's driving for some other fleet today. And then it's also 39 leads you can't market to, next month and going forward. So at the very least, it's one missed hire, which is about $1,000 a day times, 22, 25 days a month driving. So you're talking about, well, just, round numbers, 40 missed calls is a $25,000 a month miss.
You're talking revenue
right, in terms of revenue, and then if that drivers typically stay 9 months, you're $25,000 times 9 months. And that's the actual full value of 40 calls going to voicemail. And when you just kind of think long-term, like, yes, I've got this now problem. A lot of recruiting teams, it's a now problem. I've got to get the calls answered. I got to get them into my ATS. I got to get them answered into my ATS. When you start thinking about what just 40 missed calls really means to the business and what that could be to recruiting goals, when you start thinking about, okay, we miss 200 calls a month, divide that by 40, that's 5 hires that we're not able to get. Now, you're never going to get to 100%. So let's just say it's 2 or 3, maybe 4 hires that if we could just somehow get those leads into our ATS and into our process, that we could be a more effective team, cost savings, increase, empty trucks get seated, and top and bottom line revenue starts improving. And that's kind of the, like what you're talking about throughout. This is a blind spot. A lot of people have it. Clearly, the poll even says so. And the fleets that are doing something about it are starting to see some benefits.
Yeah, I believe, when we have run through this with, we've done the math with individual fleets kind of thing. I think we've normally seen that if you could figure out a way just to field more of these phone calls, and I'm not necessarily like, just figure out a way to get more out of this bevy of calls that you get no value from without even increasing your spend on advertising, there's 2 to 4 hires there that you're leaving on the table. Aaron, you think that's true? What would you add to that?
I think there's a caveat.
Ooh,
we have quite a few clients that their current process is to answer the call. If the driver has a couple questions, answer those questions, and then tell them, hey, go fill the application out. We'll take a look at it, and then we'll call you back if we're interested. And that call, in the scenario we're talking about now, would be considered answered, but they don't do anything with it. It's basically a waste anyway. They didn't capture the information. They didn't build a profile. They have no way to remarket to them. And they basically just put all the power and onus back on the driver to fill out the application. So I guess my point is just answering the calls isn't the answer, because we got a lot of folks that do that.
Okay.
They're answering it, but it's still a worthless connection, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does.
So I would say the second piece to that would be just start the profile, do something, create some of that profile, and then, then start your re-engagement after the fact. Because I still think it's somewhere around 60% when you tell them, hey, I'm going to send you a link, go fill the app out. Somewhere around 60% never fill the app out.
Oh, yeah. So what would you say, but on the value side of things, like how much is being left on the table every month for most fleets? Just with the current lead volume that they have, how much do you feel is being left on the table just because of this leaky funnel that we're talking about?
I don't think I have anything more to add than what Kyle said. I think he nailed it. It has something to do with the cost of the lead to hire ratio, the 2 to 3 hires a month. And it could be obviously more than that, depending on the size of the fleet.
Right.
And then the revenue per truck per day. I mean, if you fill 1 or 2 trucks, it's a no-brainer, in my opinion, with zero additional budget spent, to your point. So,
okay. So now we've talked a little bit about what fleets can do to combat this. We've talked about, hey, just start a profile. We've talked about, I think in the past we've talked about, hey, for these after hour weekend stuff, there's been like the after hours weekend phone that has been round robin around the recruiting team that they have to field calls on the weekend. We talked about a lot of stuff. Now, full transparency, Randall Riley has a new product that is built specifically to address this issue head on. And we're not going to go much longer, but if you allow me just a little bit of time here, I want to tell you a little bit about why we've given you a good apologetic for why we've built this. So I want to talk a little bit about what it can do and how it works. So Kyle, since you are the architect of this product, why don't you start and tell them a little bit about Stratus Agent and what it is and what it can do?
Yeah, real quick, Stratus Agent is a virtual recruiting assistant, and it's completely designed to engage with inbound calls from drivers looking for job info, and then steer that conversation into collecting all the kind of the vital information, more than a short form, but not a full application, as well as a summary and other details about talking to that driver and what they're looking for, and execute that activity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and then do some pretty crafty thinking after the fact. So we spend a bunch of time around the intent of the caller and being able to kind of specify when a call comes in, is this someone calling back? If they're looking for the address of orientation, because I can't remember what it is, and it's 7:00 and orientation starts tomorrow. We want to be able to field that differently than the driver looking for a job, and have a great engagement and great engaging conversation with them, and get all that routed and flagged accordingly in the ATS. And so that was the goal behind it, is to help get calls answered, get drivers engaged, so they stop not leaving voicemails, not to give you a double negative, but we wanted to turn that missed call into a lead and get that into the client's ATS. And we've been very successful at doing that so far.
Yeah, see, I feel like you're being a little coy. I feel like I need the real, like, big fat claim, Kyle. So we spent a lot of time on this thing. And, as you know, like, the world of trucking is full of lingo, and you can sound really inauthentic using the wrong words. So, I mean, we really poured over the word choices and making sure that we're using like the right things of, like, when to use certain words so that it feels more natural to a driver.
Right.
Chris Starnes the other day said that it's so real that drivers are starting to flirt with the AI agent. But then the other part that I think I also wanted to see you say, like, boom or beast mode or something like that, was the fact that all these missed calls are ending up in an ATS with qualifying information. So that, that one guy was asking, well, how do we stop, fielding these phone calls of people that are not interested or not qualified or things like that? Well, this system, you could actually send all your calls that go through that. You would actually be able to look at the transcript of the call and look at the qualifying information and say, it's not worth our time to call back. So this solves that problem to some degree. Aaron, why don't you talk a little bit and kind of close us out on how is this? We're kind of in the early stages, but what are some of the kind of the early successes that we've seen as fleets have begun to implement this?
Well, first of all, we have our own internal RPO team. We have quite a few clients that use our own RPO team to help them hire talent. So we've also used this with our team. And I think initially there was a concern, is this going to replace recruiters? There's the human element still needs to be there. It is just allowing your skilled professional recruiters to spend time on the right candidate. So to me, it is an excellent opportunity to, like you said, to filter out, she's asking qualifying questions. Now, obviously, we're not doing a PSP or a background check, but there is a ton of time savings that she's allowed to just tip of the spear, 7 or 8 questions. What routes are you interested in? Who are you driving for now? When's the best time to follow up? That is just going to be instrumental in giving back recruiters time to focus on what matters most. I think that's the big one. So it's not replacing recruiters. It's just, in my opinion, it's from what we've seen so far, it is serving up on a silver platter the better ones to follow up with and to eliminate some of those worthless phone calls.
Well, we already saw from the poll results that many of the people on the call said that, somewhere between 30 to 50% of their leads come in after hours, right? Your live recruiters are already not engaging with that part. So all this is doing is expanding the reach of your recruiting team to say, this whole swath of drivers that you have not been getting value from because of when they call or when they send in the lead, or just the limits of, the hours that your recruiters are able to work, we're giving your recruiters access to that now. It's like you have a way to reach these ones that you're already paying for, but your recruiters are not going to be doing any less work fielding all the calls they already are doing and doing all the outbound attempts that they're already doing. You're just making it a way to actually reach this group that you've never reached before, in a way.
So real quick, David, you want something a little more fireworks. I've been supremely impressed by the number of clients where we get them started. Stratus agent starts answering the phones after hours and on weekends. And in less than 2 weeks, they're like, we've already gotten hires. Here's an example of a driver that we would have missed, filled out a full application, got recruited, and is in orientation, just left orientation, got hired. Like, we've had those stories across the board. But the part that's most exciting is they say, and I don't want your agent to just do after hours anymore. I want your agent to engage all my inbound. All their inbound calls to the agent to do what we're talking about, to save time so recruiters can focus, and it's buying back countless hours for recruiting teams while putting leads into the ATS that otherwise would have been missed, doing a better job of getting leads into the ATS than some of the recruiters. And, I wasn't necessarily prepared when we started launching it or even building it, that it was going to be a full-time service for clients. And to see that has been really impressive for us, but and a huge kind of compliment to the team and everybody that helped put all this together.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. I mean, that was like a firecracker. I don't know if that was a full firework. We've seen you. We wanted like the M60 version. But anyway, so
Trying to tone it down.
I'm going to go ahead. You guys feel free to add anything. I'm going to go ahead and start the wrap up. I really appreciate everyone that joined us for digging deeper. We'll be back next month with another one. I hope you don't mind that we got a little bit of product going. I will say I just added a link to the stage. You see in the right corner of the stage, you see Demo Stratus Agent. If you want to give this thing a call, we've set up a demo agent to where you can call the number on this webpage. If you want to or fill out a form, if you want to talk to somebody about it. But I would encourage you all to call the number, pretend you're a driver, go through it, see how it operates, see how well it does, and see. I think you'll be really impressed. So if you're skeptical, go ahead and click that link, follow it, see what you think. The other question that usually pops up is if you want a link to this episode, we will be putting it out on YouTube for everybody to see. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them, but I'm going to give Aaron the last word. And if nobody asks any questions in the meantime, we will go ahead and end this thing. But Aaron, what's the last word on this?
I am not typically the fireworks guy. So I will say this is one of the most exciting things I've seen that we've rolled out in years. And I think we got some help for over the last year or so. I've had clients asking, hey, what is Randall Riley doing with AI? We were very hesitant to just use the AI buzzword in every piece of sales collateral until we actually had something that was extremely valuable. Because I mean, Google and the way it randomly serves ads, and Facebook does the same thing, you could call that AI. So we wouldn't have been lying to say, we are harnessing AI in your campaigns. We just didn't feel good about using AI without it being something amazing. And I am saying this has been amazing. And this is only stage 1, version 2, version 3. The stuff we're looking at for outbound calls and dispatch and
orientation.
Orientation it's not just drivers, by the way. We've got 2 or 3 of these case studies working outside of driver recruiting, but the ability to train her on the client's specific criteria. I have been blown away on what she answers, how she answers it, how real it is, and how seamless it flows into their ATS system. So it is extremely impressive.
I love how
all right. Well, that was a good ending. Good ending. Nice fireworks. Appreciate everybody. I don't see any questions in the panel. So with that, we'll say goodbye and see you next time.
Thanks.